Hello students, let's see the continuation of the topic mass defect. So first of all, let's start from the definition. In the previous session we have discussed about the various factors, right, regarding the nuclear size, nuclear density, all the other features of the nucleus we have seen. So now we'll start that, we'll discuss about the mass defect in this session. So very interesting one. Further development of the topic is based on this mass defect alone, because from the observations which are made experimentally, of course from the experimental setups and all, by number of experiments, rest mass of the nucleus of a stable atom is always less than the mass of the constituent nucleons in free state of a nucleus. So that difference of, which means whenever you consider a nucleus whose rest mass, the rest mass of the nucleus of a stable atom is always less than the mass of the constituent nucleons in a free state of a nucleus, and that is what we call it as mass defect. So the difference between the rest mass of the nucleus and the sum of the masses of the nucleons which are composing a nucleus is nothing but known as mass defect. So that is what we are actually speaking about. Are we clear with this? So if you represent, if you want to calculate about this, this is what your final formula: Z into MP. What do you mean by Z? Number of protons into mass of the protons plus A minus Z. What will you get for A minus Z? It's nothing but number of neutrons into mass of the neutron. So this is nothing but total constituents of the nucleus. This part, let me write down. So this particular part is the mass of the nucleons, this part, nucleons, while this is mass of the nucleus, rest mass. Are we clear with this? Okay. And the final answer, or you can call that total definition, was to be called as delta M equal to Z into MP plus A minus Z into Mn minus M. Are we clear with this? Okay ma? Right. Suppose if you want to represent in a different notation, we can also write down in a different way, which is nothing but, let me erase this so that I will add and subtract a term to this. Now already we are having this ZMP, right? So Z into MP plus Z into Me. Mass of the, of course, number of protons are nothing but number of electrons, right? So total number of electrons into mass of the electron I am adding here, plus A minus Z into Mn, I am not changing this, minus capital M minus ZMe. Will the value change? Do the value change here? Which means I am adding Z into Me and at the same time I am subtracting Z into Me. Value doesn't change, right? So now look at these two terms, first two. Now from this, can I take Z as to be common? If I take out, it will be nothing but mass of the proton plus mass of the electron plus A minus Z into Mn, mass of the neutron, minus, taking out minus common, M plus Z into Me. That's it, right? What do you mean by this mass of the proton plus mass of the electron? One proton, one electron is nothing but mass of hydrogen atom, isn't it or not? And electron plus mass of the nucleus is nothing but mass of an atom. That's it, right? Z into Me is nothing but total mass of the electrons plus mass of the nucleus. This is nothing but total mass of the atom. So I am going to call this as Z into Mh plus A minus Z into Mn minus Ma. Of course you can write down like this, not a deal. Are you getting the point here? Just to write in this similar format, just writing here. And what do you mean by this Ma? It is nothing but this M plus Z into Me mass of the nucleus plus total mass of the electrons. So electrons plus nucleus combines atoms will gives us total mass of the atom, while mass of the proton and mass of the electron gives us mass of the hydrogen. So atom, hydrogen atom, which is nothing but, so ZmH plus A minus Z into Mn minus Me. Are we clear with this? Okay ma? Right. Now coming to the one more definition called mass defect per nucleon is called packing fraction. So we are already speaking about the mass defect, right? So if you consider this mass defect, per nucleon, we call it as packing fraction of a nucleus, which is nothing but, so we can write it as a packing fraction Pf equal to delta M per nucleon, mass number only, right? So we have to, so delta M by A. What is the significance of this particular packing fraction? Means it gives about the stability of that particular nucleus what we have actually considering. Okay, so packing fraction is directly related to the availability of nuclear energy and the stability of the nucleus. Remember this always. So if packing fraction is positive, nucleus is unstable. If packing fraction is negative, then it indicates that some mass have been converted into energy which binds the nucleons together, and so nucleus is stable. Anyway, later we will have a binding energy per nucleon. There you will understand this in much detailed, clear manner. The same similar kind, but here we are straight away speaking with mass defect per nucleon. There we will speak about in a different notation. With respect to, in terms of the energy we will speak about. Here we are speaking about mass, change, difference of the mass per nucleon. There we will speak about in terms of the energy. So okay, let me write down this again. So if Pf is positive, what this indicates? For such a kind of nuclei is unstable. Packing fraction is negative. If packing fraction is negative, what that indicates? Some of the energy is already been converted and it is binding the nucleons together, and thus nucleus is stable. Generally this kind of packing fraction will be negative for the kind of low number of mass number, and for packing fraction will be positive for higher number of mass number. And anyway, you can see here, basing on delta M alone, all these are possible actually. Are you getting the point here? So when can be this be positive, when can be this negative, means from this you can understand very clearly. Z into Mb plus A minus Z into Mn minus M. So this deals a very important, this plays a very important role for the positive and negative factor of the, what we call, say, packing fraction. So are we clear with this? Right. Now let's look about the next topic, binding energy. So binding energy is nothing but the energy released when proton and neutron combine to form a nucleus, or we can also call it as the energy required to break the nucleus into its constituent protons or neutrons. Suppose if I have a neutron and a proton, when they combine, the energy released is nothing but binding energy. Or you can also call it as, which this particular or let's say, let me draw the figure in a other manner. When neutron and proton combines together, we are getting a nucleus, isn't it or not? And thus energy released in that process, we are calling it as binding energy. Or you can call it as the energy required to break the nucleus into its constituent protons and neutrons, vice versa situation, which is nothing but, so like this. Can I plot? Now here we are actually supplying the energy, and that is what we call it as binding energy. So the energy released when neutron and proton are combined to form a nucleus, or the energy required to break a nucleus into neutrons and protons, is nothing but binding energy. You can also call it as energy equivalent of mass defect. One more easy definition, energy equivalent of mass defect. That's what I have mentioned here, delta mc square. We are very familiar with this equation at E equal to mc square. Instead of m, I am using delta m. That's it, nothing new. So are we clear with this? And remember, binding energy will always tells us regarding the stability of. If it requires more energy, what that means? The atom or this nucleus is much stable, and at the same time if it is giving out the energy also the same situation, right? Because it is much stronger. If it is very strong enough in the forces, you have to apply more amount of energy. Then the particular nucleus requires more energy, thus binding energy is more. So binding energy of the nucleus is provided by the mass defect, which is only a small fraction of the mass of the nucleus. That's it, right? Very small amount of. Now if you want to write down that binding energy, delta m already we have calculated, right? What it was? Z into mp plus a minus z into mn. That's it, true? Minus m, mass of the atom, isn't it or not? Or the particular nucleus, into c square. Look here, I have not mentioned in terms of the hydrogen atom, so straight away I am calling z into mp, mass of the protons, plus a minus z, number of neutrons, into mass of the neutron. So total mass of the nucleons minus mass of the nucleus. Hope you are understanding my vocabulary. This is mass of this first term, whatever you are actually speaking, this is mass of nucleons, while this is mass of nucleus, okay, into c square. That's it, right? Which you are actually speaking about. And if you calculate this delta mass in terms of mass difference, or you can call it as a mass defect in terms of the atomic units, atomic mass units, then binding energy can be given as Be is equal to delta m into 931.5 MeV. Do you remember this? One atomic mass unit equal to, we have already seen earlier in the calculation, one atomic mass unit is equal to 1 AMU equal to 931.5 MeV by c square. Do you remember this? Mass and all. And if you consider about the energy alone, it will be just 931.5 MeV. I told you already. So the same I am speaking here. This delta m is nothing but 1 AMU if it is so. Are we clear with this? Okay, ma? Right. If all the masses are, of course, if all the masses instead of AMU, if you measure, this is in terms of AMU, if measured in kg, this is for if measured in AMU. If measured in AMU, this is the formula. If measured in kg, we can write down that binding energy to be as delta m into c square straight away, joule. No problem at all. Are we clear with this? Okay, ma? Right. Now let's look about the next topic, binding fraction. Same, just like similarly the approach what we have discussed earlier, like mass defect, similar fashion here in terms of the energy. Binding fraction is nothing but average binding energy per each nucleon. Simply you can call it as binding energy divided by total number of nucleons, which are nothing but, nucleons are nothing but total mass number, right? So that's what denoted by B bar. So B bar equal to Be by nucleons, so delta mc square by A. Are you getting the point here? You can also write down this as this delta mc square by A to be as, of course in terms of AMU, delta m into 931.5 whole divided by A MeV. Just I have substituted the values, that's it, nothing I have to do. So for stable nuclei, binding energy per nucleon is large, and for unstable nuclei, binding energy per nucleon will be small. So binding energy per nucleon, Be by A, we can call it as, is large for stable. Let me write down a proper, is large for stable, which means they require more, and small for unstable. So So very easily we can kind of. So binding energy per nucleon is large for sorry, I repeat, I have made that reverse while writing, sorry. Binding energy per nucleon is large for stable, and for unstable nuclei binding energy per nucleon will be small. I think I wrote properly. Okay. Binding energy per nucleon is large for stable and small for unstable, right? So if you want speak about in terms of the two different kinds of the nuclei, for an example, just an example constraint, Be1 by A1 for one nuclei and Be2 by A2 for another nuclei. Let's say suppose if we consider, if this is the condition, Be1 by A1 is greater than Be2 by A2, this nuclei which is Be1 by A1 having is stable, more stable, you can call it as comparison, right? So more stable. So binding energy per nucleon is large for stable and binding energy per nucleon is small for unstable. Understand this? Are we clear with this? Right. Now let's go to the next topic, binding energy curve, a very important one, which you can notice here. I have taken mass number along the x-axis and average binding energy per nucleon along the y-axis. Binding energy per nucleon versus mass number I am actually calling. Okay, right. So for different atoms, and of course you can call it as isotopes, I have considered here. You can notice here hydrogen 11, 12, helium, hydrogen 13, lithium 6, 7, beryllium isotopes, helium isotope again, carbon, nitrogen, fluorine, oxygen, neon, all the different isotopes along with atoms I am considering here. So for different kinds of, and remember, not all I have mentioned for the uniformity in the nature of the graph I have taken. Look here, uranium 92 to 235, uranium 92 to 238, both I have taken. Okay, so more commonly whatever the nuclei we consider, I have taken this. Okay, you can notice here, out of this entire graph, the iron is having the highest. Look here, binding energy per nucleon. Now if we plot a graph for that, the nature of the graph will be like this. Okay, right. Now let us understand for which nucleus it is more. As I told you already, it is for iron 56. That is the region of maximum stability, which means the nuclei which are in that region are having greater stability than or. So that was, we call it as region of maximum stability. Are you getting the point here? Okay ma? Right. This part, beyond that, after the stability, the nuclei will participate in fission. What do you mean by fission? In the lower standards you might have already have this introduction, so that's why I am taking the advantage. So fission refers to splitting up of the nucleus. So an unstable nuclei will split up into two or more stable nuclei. In order to attain stability, it will go for, anyway at the end of the topic we have, there we can discuss. So as the nuclei are unstable beyond this region, that's it, no, this is the region of maximum stability. So beyond that, all these are having will go for fission. So they are all unstable nuclei, hence in order to attain stability they will go for fission process. And the nuclei below this region, which is nothing but region of maximum stability, below that are also unstable in terms of, even though they are small enough, even though they are very small nuclei, still they want to attain more and more stability, and thus they will combine together, and that is what the process we call it as fusion, combination of. And now if you look about the special features of this particular binding energy per nucleon curve, the first thing, binding energy per nucleon of a very light nucleus such as hydrogen 12 is very small. Notice here, that's it, right? In the figure you can notice hydrogen 12. Okay, Initially, there is a rapid rise in the value of binding energy per nucleon. We can notice from the graph up to the 7 the value is keeping on increasing. Between the mass numbers 4 and 20, the curve shows cyclic recurrence of peaks corresponding to helium 24, beryllium 48, carbon 612, oxygen 816 and neon 1020. This shows that the binding energy per nucleon of these nuclides is greater than those of their immediate neighbors. Have you seen that various peaks which you can notice here? Color, the purple color you can notice here, violet, purples. Have you seen? The curve was like this, up and down like this. So at this region I am speaking about 4 and 20, which means from here to up to this region 4 to 20. Okay, in this you can notice here. Okay ma, right. After a equal to 20, a is along x-axis, you can see here, this is a. After a equal to 20, you can see here, notice there is a gradual increase in binding energy per nucleon. The maximum value of 8.8 MeV is reached at a equal to 56. Notice here, after that, until here in the previous we have noticed here, maximum it went here, there is a deep decrement, and again it gradually increase, decrease, there is a rapid motion, and from after 20, look at the motion of the graph. Actually you should not strictly speak the motion, the variation actually. So after the 20s, look here, the graph is keeping on increasing here at this point, isn't it or not? The maximum value is at 8.8 MeV, that is for iron. You can notice here for 56, of course for iron, I have mentioned that separately, 56 respective value 8.8. Therefore iron nucleus is the most stable from this particular. Okay, binding energy per nucleon of nuclides having mass numbers ranging from 40 to 120 are close to the maximum value. So from 40 to 120 almost, which means here and more I have taken the edges also, because not all these will go for immediate fission. They are not exactly completely, you can say that it will be, but this is for maximum stability. So from 40 to 120 we can have stability. Out of that, the peak region is this one, region of maximum stability. Are you getting the point here? So binding energy per nucleon of nucleides having mass numbers ranging from 40 to 120 are close to the maximum value. So these elements are highly stable and non-radioactive. So these elements, they are not at all radioactive in nature. Radioactivity refers to, in order to attain stability, I told you right, they will go for either fission or further fusion. And of course while fission, when they go for undergo, they will radiate or they will give out some of the energy particles. Later we will discuss about all that in our next topic, alpha beta gamma radiations, okay, in order to attain stability, and that is what we call it as radioactivity. And here all these stable elements, they do not have that property, and that's why they are called it as non-radioactive. Coming to the next one, beyond a equal to 120, after this the value decreases and falls to 7.6 MeV for uranium. Look here, after 120, look here, it is getting reduced and fall to 120, the value falls to 120, and of course after this 120 falls to 7.6 MeV for uranium. After 120 I am speaking about. After 120, look here how it fall to 92 to 236, 92 to 38, 235 to 36, all this. It was around 7.6 MeV. Okay. While for the iron it was 8.8. Have you noticed? You may feel that there is no much difference between 7.6 and 8.8, but still how significant it is when we consider the radioactivity, you will understand. Okay. Beyond a equal to 128, the value shows a rapid decrease. This makes elements beyond the uranium are called transuranium elements, quite unstable and radioactive. So after this 128 A value, these are having a wide variation, and that's why we call them as transuranium elements, and they are quite unstable and radioactive. So in the fission process they will be, okay, plutonium, all these kind of example, radium, plutonium, thorium, all these are. The dropping of the curve at high mass number indicates that the nucleons are more tightly bound and they can undergo fission to become stable. So this drooping of the curve, which means the value is getting reduced, right? So this drooping of the curve at high mass, even though the mass number is high, still they are getting reduced, refers to the nucleons are more tightly bound and they can undergo fission to become stable. That's it, right? The drooping of the curve at low mass number indicates that the nucleons can undergo fusion to become stable, while at the same time here also there is a drooping. So that's what. So for both, in the both regions I am speaking about, they will go for fusion while they will go for fission. You can ask me, sir, why they can't go for fission? Because there is already a very small atomic mass number and further the division is not at all that possible, while here the mass number is very high. So the possibility is it's a very heavy huge nucleus, so there is a possibility that they can be divided, while here there are already small nucleus in this left hand side part, this part they are already small nucleus, so there is no possibility of further more division in that. Are we clear with this? Right. So now if you want, we can make a note of all this, all the points what we have discussed. I just made a proper notation of all this, whatever the discussions till now we made. And regarding the maximum minimum of this particular curve, whatever we are actually speaking about, okay, where in the region of smaller mass numbers, the left hand part, in the region of the smaller mass numbers, the binding energy per nucleon curve shows the characteristic minima and maxima. That's it, right? In the, we have seen the curve I am speaking about, this curve, maxima minima curve. Okay, in this region there is a maxima and as well as minima. Minima are associated with nuclei containing an odd number of protons and neutrons, such as like lithium 36, boron 510, nitrogen 714, and the maxima are associated with nuclei having an even number of protons and neutrons, such as helium 24, carbon 612, oxygen 816. Various isotopes we have taken, right? So I am speaking about this region. So minima are associated with nuclei containing odd number of protons, while maxima are associated with nuclei having even number of protons, maxima minima corresponding. Okay ma, are we clear with this? And by the way, first of all, whenever we consider any nuclear reaction, whenever we consider about any nuclear reaction, the nuclear reaction should follow some of the rules so that the nuclear reaction will occur, then alone it will occur, which means a nuclear reaction can occur only if certain conservation laws are followed, strictly speaking, if you want. And first one is conservation of mass number, conservation of charge, conservation of energy, linear momentum and angular momentum. So conservation of mass number, conservation of charge, conservation of energy, linear momentum and angular momentum. If all these conservation laws are obeyed or followed, then alone a nuclear reaction can always occur. Always remember this. And it can be an endoergic or exoergic. Endoergic refers to the reaction in which energy will be absorbed, are called endoergic, while exoergic are nothing but the reaction in which energy will be released, like how you discussed in chemistry, exothermic, endothermic. So here we will speak about in terms of energy, that was regarding the heat energy. Here we will speak about the pure energy. Remember, while I am using the word energy, energy doesn't always represents, it should be in the format of heat energy. It can be in the format of the kinetic energy also. Later in the nuclear chain reaction you will understand this, why I am using this word. Because when a particular nuclear reaction will occur, it doesn't always means that it always gives out the heat energy. We will always speak about the total energy alone, and that total energy contains part and part of the amount to be like a heat energy, part and part of the amount to be like a sound energy, and part and part of the amount to be in the some other various format of, it can be like kinetic energy too. So that's what I am speaking about. So conservation of energy holds means this is what. And endoergic, exoergic refers to which requires energy for the particular action to is nothing but are called absorbed, which is nothing but are called endoergic, while the reactions which gives out energy, which releases the energy, are called exoergic. Are we clear with this? Okay ma?